Okay, let's get started. Thank you for being here today. On behalf of Smart Dolphins, I'd like to welcome you to today's Excel webinar. My name is Matthew, and I am the marketing coordinator here at Smart Dolphins. Haley and I will be here throughout the webinar today to help answer any questions or pass them along to our trainer. Before handing it over to our trainer, I'd like to quickly share some information on our upcoming public webinars. First off, next Tuesday, November 12th, we have a session on Power BI for accountants. And then November 14th, we have a session on Copilot, leveraging AI as a virtual assistant. Then on November 21st, we have a session on Microsoft Teams covering virtual meetings. Please visit our website to register. If you have any questions today, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A here in the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along or save them for the end. We'll also save a few minutes at the end for any questions. Feel free to download the handout from the chat to follow along with today's sessions.
When I saw this,
I'd now like to introduce our trainer for today's presentation. It's a great pleasure to welcome Jolynn Reen. Jolynn stands out as a Microsoft Master Trainer and instructor with over 30 years of experience. Thank you for joining us today, Jolynn. Please take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you everyone for joining us. Today's topic being Microsoft Excel is very near and dear to my heart, is something that I'm using absolutely every day. And I feel that these topics that we're going to be discussing here today are going to be things that if you're not already using, you definitely want to pay attention today. There's going to be some features that will help you to really automate more of what it is that we do when it comes to managing businesses. So kind of starting with that topic of, if you are working in the accounting field, it doesn't matter what your title is. You could be a bookkeeper, you could be the CFO of an organization, whatever your title is, there's definitely some tools built into Excel that can be very beneficial for you to know about. So what I wanted to start with is, I want to show you my screen here. So this is just I'm in Excel and I'm using the desktop version of Microsoft 365 just so everybody knows what I'm using. And I'm in the file menu and I went to the new category on the left-hand side and I did a search just on accounting. Just the term accounting. Look at all these different templates that actually come with Excel that are great starter tools that you could be using to help manage your data. So a lot of times we're going to have a data set that sometimes might be coming from an accounting system, whether you're using an ERP system or whatever software you might be using, and you might be connecting that to Excel. You might be exporting the data, or you might be managing all of your accounting directly in Excel. So there's definitely some tools that we need to get to today that will help you to manage all of that. So as I kind of show you, just to mention a few of these templates that you could use to get you started, credit card tracking. If you have company credit cards out there, there's a template that you could actually use to help you track those credit cards. Travel expense calculator. So if you have people that are traveling and they get reimbursed for any travel expenses, invoice trackers, invoices. A lot of these I've been using for quite a few years, and I basically just tweak them for my own company. I put my own logo out there. I change my, tax codes or whatever else needs to be modified. But as you can see, when you look through these, this is just a basic search that I did just on the word accounting. If I put in finance as a topic, you're going to find a whole bunch of other types of templates. So highly recommend checking out those templates. Now, of course, here today, we're going to be using a specific file. But before I get started with that file and the topics that I want to talk to you about today, which I'm super excited about because this is kind of an end result. When we talk about having data, so this could be the raw data that you need to analyze. Like I said, whether it's being hand entered or you're connected to with an ODBC connection to your ERP system, whatever it is that you do, this could be the raw data, but how do you find out what details you have? we create pivot tables to usually analyze that in what is called a dashboard. So by the end of our session today, I'm going to get to creating a pivot table, a pivot chart, using slicers, using timelines, so that we have a great way to be able to drill in and only see the information that we want to see. So it can look like this. So we can have a dashboard that we are using different tools to help us to filter the data we need to see. And that's what these are up at the top. If you have not seen slicers before, you're going to see how to use those here today, and they are fantastic. I'll get into a little bit more advanced details on something like this as well. But if I wanted to just find out about a specific customer, I could click on a slicer for that customer, and it's going to update all of these pivot tables which are related to the charts below them. So it's a one worksheet called a dashboard that we could use to analyze different sets of information. Now, I know that everybody uses different types of information, which is fine. That's great. That's going to be normal in all organizations, but there are a lot of different tools built into Excel that you can use. I just wanted to show you a couple of other examples. This is just revenues based on sales, where it's using a table to help analyze the data. Tables can be a very important tool to use, and it's actually using these spark lines, which are mini charts. I do have some information about spark lines in your handout. We may not have time to get to all of these great topics here in Excel today, but just to give you a little bit of an idea. Now, this is also an expense analysis that I wanted to briefly show you, where it's using charts, it's using tables. So tables, pivot tables, charts, and ways to quickly and easily change your mind depending on what it is that you need to see at any given time can be some important tools to use. But let me get to our raw data file. Just to get us started with a few different things, this is going to be the Excel file that was shared in the chat with you, Excel for Accountants. This has several different sheet tabs going across the bottom, and I'm going to start on the References tab. So when we talk about different tools built into Excel, there is a feature that I don't care what type of accounting it is that you do, or even being a business leader in general. This is a tool that everyone should be using, and it's called named ranges. First topic in your handout. So when it comes to using named ranges, it has a lot of benefits. We're not going to get to every feature within Excel, of course, today because we only have an hour, but there's a lot of tools with Scenario Manager that allow us to take advantage of named ranges. Named ranges can be used in formulas to make the formulas easier to understand. Plus, it saves us time and effort with having to go back and select raw data. So if we're going to be analyzing information that has 10,000 rows of records, or I have a chart of accounts and I want to be selecting my description of my chart of accounts or my account codes or whatever your case might be, naming those ranges is going to be a huge benefit for you. We can use them for navigating when it comes to our dashboards where we quickly need to be analyzing our information. I could spend all day just talking about the benefits to named ranges, but what are they? Well, when you go to a cell, you can identify that cell. Like right now I'm on cell G2, and you can see in the name box it says G2, but I want to name that cell based on what it is. What's on G2? Well, G2 has a commission rate, and I want to be able to use that commission rate in a formula here on this references worksheet, and I want to use it in a formula on a different sheet. I do this with travel all the time because we have one mileage rate per year, and I use that mileage rate on multiple sheets. I name it to make it easier for me to use it across all sheets. As a matter of fact, I can use it across workbooks as well. But just to give you an idea, I'm going to be on cell G2. I'm going to click in the name box where it tells me the name of my active cell. I'm going to type the name that I want to call it, which is going to be commission rate. So I'm actually typing the physical name that I want to call it to uniquely identify that cell. There's some guidelines in your handout right on page 1 about naming a cell or a range of cells. There's no spaces. They can't be the same as a cell reference, but the big thing is no spaces. So I'm using uppercase and lowercase, or you could use an underscore to separate words to help you name them. But after you type it from the name box, just press your enter key, and that automatically has named that cell. I'm now going to use it in a formula to calculate the commission for this group of salespeople. Something pretty basic, where I just want to say equal, I want to take their total, and I want to multiply it by the commission rate. As soon as I start typing CO, because I'm in a formula, it assumes I want to use a function. So it's going to bring up a list of the functions that begin with that letter, and notice they have the circle with the FX next to it. You know it's a function. But if it's a named cell, it's going to have the squares with the blue. So commission rate, I can double click on it and it automatically selects G2. I'm going to do Control Enter to stay on that cell, and I see the answer. Another benefit of having this as a named range is it's an absolute reference by default. So for those of you that use dollar signs to lock a cell down to copy a formula, use a named range instead. It becomes an absolute reference. So I can copy this down, and every one of these salespeople will have the answer based on that cell G2. But like I said, I can use that cell G2 in any worksheet. So let's say that I go to the dates worksheet and I just go to a blank cell and I want to create a formula that's going to take 1,000 multiplied by commission rate. I can do a formula on any sheet within this workbook referencing that same cell. And if that cell, of course, changes, it will automatically update the formula regardless of where its location is. So huge benefit. Also, just so everybody's aware, if you go to the Formulas tab of the ribbon, there is this Defined Names group. This is another place that you can create and manage your named ranges. If I click Name Manager as an example, it's going to show me my named range. Just so you know, you can see it from there. This is where I could create new ones. I could also edit an existing one if I needed to change the range or the name or whatever. I also could delete them. So if they become obsolete, you're not using it anymore, you've deleted the worksheet that it was in, you need to clean it up in here. It doesn't automatically disappear, just so you're aware of that. Now I'm going to go back to the references worksheet and I'm going to create one more named range. I'm going to go to cell, I'm going to select F1 and G1. I'm going to select F1 and G1. I want to take the name from F1 to name the cell in G1. So it's going to name G1 Sales Goal. By going to the Formulas tab of the ribbon in the Defined Names group, I'm going to click Create from Selection. It looks at my cells that I have selected and it notices text is in the left column. So it has that selected and it's going to create names from the values in that column. All I have to do is click OK. Now, how do I know what it did? Well, one thing that I could do is go to the name box. This is another shortcut. If I go to the name box, click on the drop-down arrow, which you may have wondered what that arrow was for, it will show you a list of your full scope named ranges. Another day for figuring all that out, but just so you could see, sales underscore goal has been added. And if I click on it, it takes me to the cell that is called sales goal. Once again, I'm going to actually create a formula utilizing that sales goal. I'm going to go to H5 and I'm going to do a formula using an if function, which is extremely popular when it comes to working in accounting. I'm going to do equal the letter I. I'm going to press my tab key to say that I want to use that function called if. Now, this is in your handout, just so you know. It's under the essential Excel functions for finance. Under that category, I'll get to a few others as well. But what this function does is it wants you to do a logical test. So we're going to test something to see if it's true or not. And if it's true, we'll have it do one thing. If it's false, we can have it do something different. So what I want it to do is I actually want it to look at their total sales. And I want to know if it is greater than or equal to the sales goal. But I'm using the named range for sales goal. Using the named range for the sales goal. So I wanted to compare F5 to see if it's greater than or equal to the sales goal. And comma to separate my arguments in my formula. If the value is true, as you can see from my screen tip, what I wanted to do is say the word yes. Now, just so you know, I'm going to click the FX because I like to cheat because I don't like to type. I'm going to click the FX either from the formula tab of the ribbon or the formula icons area, because that's going to automatically open up my function arguments. I call this my helper window to help me build formulas, but it separates my arguments by putting commas in, and I want the value, if true, to be text. So I'm going to click in the field for value if true, and I'm going to say yes. Then I'm going to tab or click in the value if false and say no. Now, the reason I came into the function arguments is I wanted to add the quotes around the yes and the no for me. I don't want to have to physically type it. So I'm going to go ahead and just click OK. And you're going to see, oops, I'm sorry, I had the wrong thing selected when I started this. Let me start over. My apologies, I did that. Not the computer, it was totally me. I'm going on only a couple hours of sleep. I'm so sorry. But let me just go back into the function arguments window. So sorry about that. I'm going to say I want to take that total sales and see if it is greater than or equal to the sales goal. And I can see that it's true. And if it's true, I want it to say a yes. And if it's false, I want it to say no. And then I'm going to go, why is it still doing that? What did I do on here? Oops, I did something. What did I do? It thinks I'm taking data from multiple ranges because of my area here. Let me do that a little bit differently here. So anyway, what I'm doing with an if, and I'm going to give you another example here of that, is I want to just basically say, look at this range of data. And if it matches whatever my criteria is, this is what I want you to do with it. So I could say that if I'm looking up, employee information, which I have a list of employees on this employees worksheet, and I'm going to do a couple of other if functions, which are very common to use within accounting. I'm going to do a sum if, a count if, and an average if. And basically what I want it to do is to look to, let's say, the region. I want to know if a person in our organization is in the South region, I want to know what their earnings is. Or I could say if they're in accounts or marketing department, I want to know what their earnings is. These are things that we can be utilizing within a dashboard for analyzing company information. So if we need to kind of hone in on things, let's say that we need to hire some new people and we don't know for sure what the average earnings for people in a specific department is. These are formulas we could be using to do that. I'm going to start with a sum if, so I'm going to do equal SU. I'm going to double click on sum if, and I'm going to say that I wanted to look at the department, which I should have named that range so I don't have to keep selecting it. So I'm having it look at the column of the department names. And what I want to do then is put in what my criteria is. So my criteria is going to be sales as an example. So I'm going to say that my criteria is sales, comma, the range of cells that I want it to add together. So this is a sum if, where it's only going to add the range of cells that I tell it to add together if they match the criteria I gave it. So it's analyzing the department, And if the department says sales, I wanted to add together the earnings, starting with the top of the earnings all the way down to the bottom. So basically, what it just did was it looked at the department and it said, if it's sales, it's going to take the number in the earnings and add them together. Now, these are functions that I personally use. I help lots of other organizations get started with their chart of accounts and set them up and do different things and transfer from one application or one software program to another. And these are things that we use on a daily basis. So this tells me how much total is being spent on their salaries for that department. Now, basically, if I wanted to know the same thing, but I want to know based on the same department, but I want to know how many people that is, I could do a COUNTIF. That would be another function that we could utilize to find out how many people or how many times does that department sales show up in that column. It will count them. So it's counting it based on a criteria. So if I do COU, I can double click COUNTIF. And all it wants to know is what is the range of cells that you want me to look at. So once again, my department column, comma, the criteria is going to be the word sales. And of course, because sales is text, we have to put the quotes around it. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but so far I've used that department column twice already. What if I need to do that 10 different times? Having it as a named range is going to be a huge benefit instead of having to keep going back and reselecting that range. So all I have to do is Control Enter, and it's going to tell me there's 7 people that are in that sales department. Next, I'm going to do an average if, where I want to get the average of those earnings based on everybody in that sales department. So I'm going to do equal, I'm going to do an average if, just like the sum if. The only difference is it will give us an average instead of a sum. Otherwise, the arguments are going to be the same. So the range I wanted to evaluate is going to be that department again. So here I am selecting that department again, which drives me crazy. I should have done it as a named range. It would have been much easier. I'll show you that in a second. But also, I want it to be the sales department. So I'm going to select sales. There's other ways to do this as well. Wish I had a week with everybody to go through some cool things, but I want to get the average of the earnings. So that's the next piece to this argument that I need to be adding in. So I'm really just saying, look at the department. If it says sales, I want to get the average of the earnings in column E. I'm going to Control Enter, and it's going to show me the average earnings of everybody within that specific department. So when it comes to working with ranges of data, no matter what your data is, there's always going to be different formulas that you're probably going to need to be calculating to be able to answer specific questions based on your data. Now, of course, there are some specifically finance related functions that are built into Excel that I want to show you. But first, before I do that, and I'm going to be going to this monthly payments worksheet, but the first thing that I wanted to mention is on the formulas tab of the ribbon, just so you know, there's a function library group and it has the financial category. So these are going to be functions that are directly related to finance. So if these are functions that you want to know more about, or you want to use one of these functions. So as an example, I'm just going to click on a blank cell to do this. Sorry. I'm going to click on a blank cell. I just went to G4. And what I'm going to do is go back to this financial, because just so you can see, as you hesitate, you will see a screen tip, and it's going to give you the function name with the arguments in parens. Then it's going to give you a description of what that function does. What if you're not sure if that's the one that you need? If you click Tell Me More, that's actually going to open up your help. It's going to take you to the help on the right-hand side where you could then drill in and see more information about that specific function. And sorry, it's a little slow on opening there right now, but basically when you go into that IRR, whichever function you're going into, it's going to give you examples of how to use it. It breaks apart the entire syntax of the formula, each argument, and will give you several examples of how to use them so that you can see if that is the right function for you. Now, of course, there's other ways to find out as well which function you should be using. I use Copilot. Copilot is a great tool to be using to say, this is what I need, what function should I be using, or how do I create that formula? I don't know why my help's not opening, but I won't worry so much about that. But just so you know, that will take you into help. That's not the only place to access help. Sorry, now my Excel kind of locked up on me. But anyway, what's going to happen is if you need help on those, you could also go to the ribbon and you could get help from there as well. You could go directly into Microsoft's website and look, or go to your favorite internet browser and look it up. And you can see different examples of how each of those can be used. So sorry, let me see if I can get back into that workbook. Let me see if I can get any of these to open. For some reason it decided that it didn't want to work right now. I'm just going to close that and see if I can reopen it. Sorry about that. Let me just restart that real quick. I'm on a different internet connection. I apologize. I'm in a remote location today. Sorry about that. I am directly connected to the internet, but Excel didn't like what I was trying to do, I think. So let me jump back into that just to show you this again. All right. So let me bring that back over to my screen so you can see what I was working on. Okay. So anyway, what I wanted to go through next with you is we have this worksheet called monthly payments. And this is going to be one of the most popular financial functions called a PMT, which calculates the payment based on a loan, an interest rate, and how many payments are you going to be making? So basically on cell B7, I have the formula already created. But what I'm going to do is, and this is something that I do on a very regular basis, especially if somebody else created the formula, I'm going to double click the cell, because it selects all the cells related to the formula. So it helps you break that formula down a little bit. So basically what this is doing is it's taking B4, which is the interest rate, dividing it by 12, and then it's taking the number of monthly payments against the loan amount. So basically this formula is helping us to figure out how much per month are we going to pay when we get that business loan. So what we can do with that PMT function is use one of our what if analysis tools built into Excel that is very common, that is called a data table. So what I have is different interest rates. So when we go to talk to the loan officer, we don't know for sure what our interest rate is going to be. We want to see what our payments would be based on different payment amount. So if we pay it back in 90 months versus 42 months versus 12 months, whatever the case would be, we want to know what that monthly payment would be. So what I'm going to do is select the cell that contains the original formula, that PMT function, which happens to be B7. And I'm going to select all the way over through my interest rates going across, which is 9%. So from 3% to 9%, down through 90 months to pay it back. So I want to analyze based on paying it back in 6 months or all the way through 90 months. Now I could be using different loan amounts. There's a lot of different ways this could be used. But once I select that range, I can tell the computer to take the original formula and switch out the interest rate from B4 with the interest rates going across the top. Then I can say take B5, the original number of monthly payments, and switch it out with column B. All I have to do is go to the Data tab of the ribbon, On the right-hand side, I'm going to go to the what if analysis. I'm going to click data table, and I'm using what is referred to as a V2 data table because I have both a row input and a column input. The row input is going to be the interest rate because that's the top row of the range I had selected. So I clicked on B4, so it put it in as an absolute reference. I'm going to go into the column input cell. That's actually going to be B5. So I'm basically saying, switch out from the original formula with these interest rates and these number of monthly payments based on that $100,000 loan amount. I'm going to click OK, and it fills out my data table automatically for me. So this way we can be looking at, what could we afford based on our sales right now and everything else going on with the organization. If we end up having a 5% interest rate, if we pay it back in 6 months, it's going to be over almost $17,000 a month. But if we spread it out over 90 months, it's going to only be $1,300 a month. So this is a great way for us to be able to analyze that data. Now, I do have this along with a couple of other functions in that same category described for you. Since we don't have time today to go through every option that is available, which is way too many options, I just wanted to give you a few examples in there. Now, when it comes to using any of those, of course, this is just one of the examples of the PMT. I do have a PMT function laid out here as well, where it gives you more of a description on some of these other ones. It looks like the named range was actually deleted on this. I should give you an updated one of these. So sorry about that. But anyway, just so you know, I did give you on that PMT worksheet a description of a few others as well, and some examples of how those formulas work, but the ranges that they were using somehow got deleted in the process, but it will still help you to see how those tools can be utilized. But starting at the bottom of page 3, it talks about the everyday functions that we use for finance. These are things that include those if functions. So I talked about a couple of the if functions, including the regular if, the sum if, the count if, the average if. There's more ifs. There are a ton of different ifs. So you can look at the examples that I included in your handout. And of course, you'll have this worksheet that you can come back and practice with all of those if these are things that you haven't used before. But there is another function that I did want to mention that is an everyday function that we use on a very regular basis. Sorry, I'm not for sure who has if you want to make sure that person gets muted. Thank you. But starting on page 7 of your handout, it talks about a feature called an X lookup. If you are a lookup user, if you use lookup functions at all, this is going to be a great tool for you to use. So let me give you an example of this. And I'm just going to go into this GL details worksheet, where I have a general ledger set up. I have my account numbers, I have my description, I have periods, amounts, and what the category is for the account number, just to give you an idea as to how you could use this. So what I did over here starting in column G is I entered in an account number. So if I want to look up an account number because I need to know the details about that account number, this would be a way that we could do that, is by using an X lookup. An X lookup is a function that has a lookup value. Our lookup value in this case is going to be that account number. So our chart of accounts number. So G2 is going to end up being my lookup value. Then what I want it to do is give me a description, populate the period, the amount, and the category coming from this big long list of all of my chart of accounts. So I want to be able to populate this account number and have it automatically give me the rest of the details. Now, to be honest, I would go to G2 and I would use data validation to create a drop-down list of all my chart of account numbers so that I would just choose the number from the drop-down list. Then whatever number is there, the X lookup will automatically populate H2, I2, J2, and K2 all at the same time. If you have ever used a VLOOKUP, an HLOOKUP, the match, the index, the regular lookup, throw those out the door, try an XLOOKUP instead. In a VLOOKUP, stands for vertical, I could have it look up each of these individual columns of values, but the difficulty with that is I have to do a separate formula for each. And it has a lot of other disadvantages. I won't get into all of those because of our time today, and I have so many things I'm trying to cram in this 1 hour. I apologize, I'm talking super fast too. But on this H2, I'm going to create a formula using the XLOOKUP. So let me walk you through. As I create it, I'll explain what I'm doing. So I'm going to do an equal, I'm going to do an X, and then I'm going to double click on XLOOKUP. So when you look at the arguments for this, it has a lot of optional arguments, which we don't get this many when we do a regular VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP. The XLOOKUP has more built-in choices, which I'll do some of these just so you can see what they could do for us. But just like an X or an HLOOKUP, what it's looking for first is what is your lookup value? That's going to be G2. So I'm going to click on G2. I'm going to put in a comma. Then it wants to know, well, where am I going to find this value? Where am I going to find what I'm looking up? That's going to be in column A. So I'm going to select A3 down through the end of my chart of accounts. ID numbers. So it's A3 through 2,594. So it's basically going to look at all of those numbers, comma, what it wants to know in this XLOOKUP is where is my value, my answers going to come from? If I just wanted the period, I could select the column for the period. Very different than a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP, where we would have to count the columns across. What if you had 200 columns across? That's where the match of the index came into play, but we don't have to do any of that anymore. The XLOOKUP looks at that specific range of cells that we tell it the answers are coming from. And the best part is I'm doing one formula to populate the description, the period, the amount, and the category at one time. I'm going to select, let me get back up to the top here, sorry about that. I'm going to be selecting, it's basically going to be, it's going to be B3 through, and I wanted to go all the way through E, and it was, let me get back down here, sorry, I just forgot the number of how far down I went. I could have selected it, but I'm just going to type it in, 2594, just so you could see. Well, I didn't have that NA, wasn't part of this anyway. So basically I have to say this is the range where the answers are going to come from. And because I'm choosing more than one column, it's going to populate the answer from all of those columns in one formula. But I'm going to go ahead and do another comma. Optional is if it's not found. So if that account number that I'm looking up isn't found within that range of cells, it can automatically give us an error code. And I'm going to say account number not valid. That's the text I want it to display for if the account number is not in that list. Then I'm going to put in a comma just so you can see what it gives me next is it wants to know what is the match mode. So if not found is going to be my next option. And then, so why did I lose that? I am so sorry. I've got it lost where it was looking those files up. I'm so sorry. Let me get back to this. I need to have it find the correct range. So it was A3, sorry, it lost my through A2594. Okay, so let me back up. So just so you can see, it's using the XLOOKUP. It's looking up G2. It's going to find G2, the account number, in the range of A3 through A2594. The answer is going to be coming from B3 through E. So all of it is going to be coming back. And then if it's not found, it's going to be bringing back this account number not valid. Now, the other optional items, just so you know, it's got a match mode and a search mode. If you're using an approximate lookup, this can do approximate, it can do an exact match, but it also can go higher or lower, smallest value to lowest value, or highest value to smallest value. And the search mode is how do you want it to search? So just so you know, it has these optional entries to it as well. But I'm just going to do a control enter and stop at the error, and it automatically found the account number that I was looking up, and it automatically populated the description, the period, which needs to be formatted as a date. Sorry about that. And then it's bringing in the account and it's bringing in the category as well. So an XLOOKUP is going to be the choice that you really should be considering. Okay, but just so you could see an example of how that XLOOKUP works. If you haven't used it yet, I gave you some examples starting on page 7 of your handout. Absolutely love that function. It is something that I use every single day, especially when I'm working in my finance information. So just so you're aware of that. But also what I wanted to mention is built into Excel is some forecasting. Probably something that you've been using, but you may not have used the tools that are directly built into Excel. I'm going to go to this worksheet called Forecast. Now, I just put in some generic information here. I've got a column of dates and the number of airport passengers. So on this date, this is how many passengers our airport had. Now, of course, there could be other relevant information, but when it comes to the forecasting that I'm going to show you, we have built into Excel a feature called a forecast sheet. This is on page 10 of your handout. So if you're going to be doing any type of forecasting, there's functions that are built into Excel that will do forecasting for you. I do have some descriptions of those in your handout, but I'm not going to actually create the formulas manually. This feature that we have for the forecast sheet, it will do the analysis for me. I'm going to select this range of cells for the date and the airport passengers. Then I'm going to go back to my data tab of the ribbon, and in the forecast group on the right, I'm going to click this icon, forecast sheet. It's going to bring up this dialog box showing me a line chart at the top, giving me my upper confidence and my lower confidence along with my actual forecast based on a date range. And it brought in what it thought I want for a forecast end date. So it's looking out through December of 2025. So it's going to take this current information, analyze it, and say, well, moving forward to this date, this is what you could expect. Now, of course, I could change this forecast end date because depending on the data that I'm analyzing, it's going to make a difference on what my date range is going to be. But I'm going to click options on the right-hand side. You can see that it's actually selecting the time, the date range, and it's selecting the passenger counts as the timeline and the values. And I'm going to keep everything that it has by default. So the start date, I'm going to change the start date to be 2022, and I'm saying to forecast out to 2025. So take that data from 20 up to 2022 and forward, and then out to 2025 to let me know what you expect based on these airport passengers. I'm only going to click OK, and it's going to give me a brand new sheet with that forecast information. It creates the formulas for me using a forecast.ets, and it gives me a chart to go along with its analysis using the forecast function along with the upper and the lower confidence levels. So what it did was it stopped at the end of that date range, said, okay, this is where I'm starting at, and this is where we're going to go out to. So it went all the way to 12 of 25, and each one of these columns that is giving us the forecasted airport passengers in the third column, and then it's giving me the lower confidence level and the upper confidence level. So if we're very confident at a 95% that that's going to be accurate, this is what it would be at 95%. So just so you can kind of see that Excel has these tools built into it now. If you haven't used this, this has saved me so much time and energy of having to do things manually myself. So great tool to be using. But I want to get back to the worksheet called, I'm going to go to the worksheet called company orders, because for our last few minutes, I'm going to go to, and I did give you some additional information in your handouts just so that you know we don't always have time to cover absolutely everything, but a big part of working with financial data, whether I'm a bookkeeper, I'm an assistant, I'm the CFO of an organization, is we're going to take that range of raw data and we want to be able to analyze it based on specific criterias. So if I need to know what's happening in a specific department with a specific company that we own, because we might have multiple companies, all of that information can be analyzed by using a pivot table. Pivot tables are going to be the number one tool that gets used within financial data. So I'm in my raw data, which happens to have company orders. So this is our invoices. So it has the company that placed the order, what country they're from, the salesperson, and the corresponding product information of what it is that they purchased. This is unsummarized data. We call it raw data. And what I want to do is go to the Insert tab of the ribbon, and I'm going to click Pivot Table. Now, of course, if you have not ever created a pivot table, it's going to select my range of data that my cursor was within, and I'm going to have it create a new worksheet, and I'm just going to click OK. So basically, I'm on a new sheet that I'm going to end up calling my dashboard. So I could go down and name this sheet, and this is where I'm going to do my final analysis of all of my raw data. And it can be coming from multiple sheets, multiple workbooks, etc. But this is where my charts are going to be. This is where I'm going to be able to drill in and just see specific information. So on the right-hand side is going to be your field list. If you're not familiar with creating pivot tables yet, this is where we select the fields based on our original data source of what we want to have displayed within the pivot table. So I'm going to be focusing on salespeople. So I'm going to choose salesperson. I get a unique list of salespeople in column A. And what I want to know is what product did each salesperson sell? So I'm going to select product name. So indented under the name of the salesperson is going to be a list of every product that that salesperson sold. So that would be one example of what I could do. Or I could uncheck product name, and maybe I want the company they sold to. I could use the company name. But I don't have any dollar values to anything, so on the right-hand side, I'm going to choose extended price. It's going to add it as a new column B and give me a sum of all of the orders for each salesperson. It's giving me a grand total of all their orders plus each company. So this way I could drill in and see specific company related information, because maybe somebody called and I need to answer some specific questions. I could use any of these fields at any time to bring in the data that we need to have within our pivot table. But I might need to analyze other information based on our company orders as well. So I'm going to go back to company orders. I'm going to create another pivot table. So I'm back on company orders. I'm going to go back to Insert Pivot Table. But this time, I'm going to say I want it to be on an existing sheet. And I'm going to have it go to the dashboard. So I'm going to end up with two pivot tables on one sheet. So I'm going to choose the cell where I want the data to go. I'm going to click OK. But this time in this pivot table, I want to see the products and I want to see a quantity. So it's giving me a sum of quantity. So I can see how much was sold per product. So just so you can see, it's a great way to be able to analyze data and see different sets of information on one sheet. But I'm going to go back to that first pivot table for an example. And I'm going to actually name this companies. And I'm going to click on this pivot table and I'm going to go up to the ribbon and name this one products, because I want to be able to filter both of these pivot tables at the same time. I want to be able to say, well, right now, I need to audit the records for all of the orders that were placed in a specific time period, or based on a specific salesperson or a country or a product name or whatever your case might be. What I'm going to do is on the Pivot Table Analyze tab, I'm going to insert a slicer. And I want to say I want to be able to filter by country and salesperson. And I'm going to click OK. It's going to add two individual windows that I'm going to be able to use, and I'm just going to make a couple of minor modifications to this just so you could see. I made the country into two columns so I don't have to be scrolling so much. I'm going to click on the salesperson slicer and change the button size so I don't have to worry about scrolling so much on that either. But what if I only want to see orders that were placed in Canada? If I click Canada, it just filtered the one pivot table, the pivot table on the left. It didn't filter the pivot table in column G and H. So let me clear that filter. And what I want to do is on each of these slicers, I'm going to go to the slicer tab on the ribbon and I'm going to click report connections, because I want to connect both of these pivot tables. Here's the names of these pivot tables. I want to connect both of these pivot tables to these slicers. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go to the country slicer, report connections. I'm going to choose the product, so it's going to filter based on both of these pivot tables at the same time. I'm going to click OK. So now let's say that I only want to see Canada. It's going to filter both pivot tables at the same time. So now I'm seeing the companies and I'm seeing the products, which I would most likely rename this so that this says products and this says companies, just so you could see. So every time that I click on the name of a country, it's going to automatically filter both of those pivot tables at the same time. Now I'm going to clear that filter from that country for right now, and I want to add in one more way to filter. I'm going to use a timeline because I need to focus on orders that were placed within a date range. So I'm going to go back to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. I'm going to go to the Filters group and click Insert Timeline. As of today, the timeline is only available in a pivot table. But if you're using a regular Excel table, you can use slicers. So I use slicers in a regular table, not just pivot tables. But to be honest, for my financial data, I'm in pivot tables all day long. Yes, this is my easiest way to analyze and be able to get what I need. So a timeline only works with date field. So I'm going to choose order date. I'm going to click OK. I now have a little window that I'm going to slide over here that this I can use to filter based on orders that were placed within a specific date range. So let's say that I only want to see orders that were based on February of 2017. Just so you know, this data is a little bit older, but still the same difference. If I click February in this timeline, it automatically has filtered just the left pivot table, not the second one, not the products, because I need to clear that filter, go back to the timeline, go to the ribbon, and I need to go to report connections so that I can connect both of my pivot tables or all 5 of my pivot tables, whatever your case is. I want to connect all of them to work with my slicers and my timelines to help me quickly and easily analyze my data. And I need to see this by quarters. So I'm going to go to the right-hand side of the timeline. I'm going to click months, and I'm going to choose quarters. And I'm going to say I need all of the second quarter for 2017. It has now filtered to display just the orders based on that date range. If I want to also filter by Canada, I can filter by Canada. So now both pivot tables are filtered based on these are the products that were sold during that time frame, and here's the companies and the total sales based on each salesperson for Canada during that time range. This is a easy way for us to be able to analyze that data very quickly and very easily. And let me go back and clear the filter on the timeline and clear the filter on this slicer by going to the top right and clicking clear, because I also want a pivot table. I'm sorry, I want a pivot chart. So I'm back on the company's pivot table. I'm going to go to the pivot table analyze tab of the ribbon, and I'm going to click pivot chart so that I can have a chart that updates every time that I filter. It's going to change the chart so we have a visual representation of that data as well. I'm just going to keep it on clustered column and click OK. Now, of course, it's going to put that chart in the middle of your worksheet. I'm not rearranging this data very well, but just so you know, I could select this entire pivot table and move it. So if I don't want it to be here, let's say that I want to move it over here, I can move a pivot table. Just so you know, they don't have to stay in their original cells. So if it automatically starts on A3, but you want it to start lower or whatever your case might be, you definitely can do that. Because when we stop and think about how do I want people to be able to quickly and easily analyze the data, set it up so that it's easy for people. So I'm going to move the chart over, and I'm going to move my slicers over, which I sometimes put at the top of my um, dashboard. All depends on, how it is that you want to be utilizing yours. I could do that with this GL information as well. I could have a pivot table right here as I'm analyzing the data in my pivot table. I can have it in the same sheet as my actual general ledger as well, just so you stop and think about the ways that we could be utilizing this. But back here on this dashboard, now that I have this chart, which is for the extended price based on the companies and the salespeople, if I want to look at just one salesperson, it's going to update the records in the pivot tables, and it's going to update the chart automatically as well. Or if I choose a country, which by the way, when I chose Ann Dodsworth, the great thing about a pivot table is you can see that she didn't sell anything in these countries. So I can't choose them from the country. But I'm going to choose Canada. So I'm narrowed down to just the products that Ann Dodsworth sold. So that's all she sold in Canada, these products to this particular company. And it's updating all of the pivot tables and the chart at the same time. So I can't say enough about understanding how easy this can be. But the key to this being easy is the original data needs to be accurate. So making sure that you use data validation so this information is accurate, so that if you're doing data entry or even if you're exporting the data from your ERP system, use some data validation to make sure that the information that is entered is accurate. So a lot of different tools that can be used when it comes to working with finance information. So pivot tables started for you in the handout on page 14. Talks about using slicers, talks about using timelines. There's a little bit more, of course, to the pivot table that I put in there, creating formulas and different things that we have on there as well, but just to give you a little bit of extra. And then visualizing data with a chart is on page 16 of your handout. Creating those charts can be done based on your regular data set, or it can be done, of course, with that pivot table, which is where I use it a lot. And then just so you know, on page 18 is the information about creating that dynamic financial dashboard. So incorporating the charts, using the slicers, using your timelines, those are going to be tools that you definitely want to be practicing with. It even talks about using conditional formatting and those types of tools with that. So Matthew, did we have anybody with any questions today?
It looks like there are no questions as of right now.
Okay.
So if that is the case, we'll wrap up for today. If you, so thank you so much, Jolynn.